Well, good day. Today we're talking about the House of Quality. And I like this tool because it tells us what we need to do to manage for quality in terms of what the customer wants and then what we need to do in order to meet the needs of the customer. So it's a very cool tool. And we really don't, we're kind of clueless as far as what we need to do. So let's just say you graduated from Poly, you stay in San Luis, and you have some ideas of what you want to do. But you're thinking about opening up a restaurant in San Luis. So you think you need paper menus, you think you need a hip location, you think you need fast delivery, you think you have a real simple menu, maybe just three or four items on the menu, kind of like in and out. So what you do is you conduct a social media survey. You canvass the area, the whole community, to try to figure out what would they support and what do they need for a new restaurant. There's a lot of new restaurants here. And then you find out that what they really want is a fired baked, thin crust pizza restaurant. Okay, so now what? What do you do? Well, what we do is in this stage is we're going to be looking at the house of quality. The house of quality falls smack dab in the define category, defining the problem, understanding the current state, and visualizing the ideal state. So what we're looking at is not necessarily a problem, but we're looking at an opportunity. So here we're going to define what that opportunity is. If we consider quality as being this particular formula called a breakthrough formula, which is breakthrough formula adding the variation, where y, this part of the formula, is the voice of the customer, which means it's required what this is what we have to do, and to meet the voice of the customer, otherwise known as quality, because remember, quality is defined by the customer. And then we have this x. The f we'll talk about later, the function of the x, but the x is the voice of the process. This is what we have to do in order to meet the needs of the customer in order to satisfy the VOC. And then we throw in variation because the whole thing in managing for quality is managing for variation. So what we have here is on the Y, we have the voice of the customer. What does that voice of the customer mean? Well, it's the output of the process. It's the critical to quality. We got to figure out what we have to do. What are the imperatives that we have to do in order to meet the voice of the customer? It's dependent on the input. It's dependent. So whatever we do, you can see that the VOP is independent. So whatever we do has a direct correlation to what the customer experiences. Lead times, the customer tells us when they want it. Capability, we'll go over a little bit later. It just means, are we capable of meeting the needs of the customer? And then how we do that, we use specification limits, and we use targets and specification widths. On the VOP side, the input, this is where we live, critical to process. So we're looking at the few things that we have to do in order to meet the critical to quality for the customer. And then again, it's independent. What we do is a direct relation to what happens to the customer. This is where cycle time, where this is what we have to do in the time frame of the cycle time to get it done, and then stability and then control limits, which we'll talk later. And as you can see, variation does not affect the customer; it affects our processes. So, all that to say is this is what we're going to be looking at: the Y and the X portion of the formula, the voice of the customer and the voice of the process. So the house of quality, number one, it measures the strength of the relationship of the voice of the customer requirements to the operational, which is the voice of the process requirements. So the voice of the customer rides here, and the voice of the process rides here. And then this is how we compare the two, the relationship of the two. It identifies the critical to quality and the critical to process, things that we have to do to meet the needs of the customer. What are the needs of the what are the few things that the customer needs, and what are the few things that we have to do in order to meet those needs? Because if we have 1,000 things that we think we have to do to meet the customer's needs, we're never going to get it done. We got to come up with the very few things that the customer needs. So again, the voice of the customer is on the left-hand side here, which is like a horizontal, and then the voice of the process is on the vertical side, and then this is where we compare the relationship of the two. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get all of those multiple critical to quality, or also those multiple competing voice of the customer things that they want, and then we want to funnel those over and to get just a few, 4 or 5 critical to quality, voice of the customer, and 4 or 5 critical to process, voice of the process. And you'll see that this works really well when you've got a plethora of inputs and a plethora of outputs, and you want to focus on what you want to do. So let's just say we examine the relationship of the voice of the customer and the voice of the process requirements to successfully provide a thin crust pizza experience to our local suburban California neighborhood community. The first step is we get a voice of the customer survey. Say we survey over 100 people, if possible. Remember, statistically, we need to have at least 30 surveys, 30 samples in order to be statistically sound. So let's just say in this case we did 100. So what we did here is we list the top voice of the customer requirements, which is here in this kind of an orangey box in the far left rows. Now it could be anywhere from 7 to 20, as long as they're high level requirements. You could add more rows if necessary. These are called the outputs to the process. So, and these are independent, or these are dependent, my bad, these are dependent on the voice of the process. So in that survey, we found out the customer wants tasty sauce, lots of menu options, fast delivery, a crunchy crust, tasty cheese, snappy texture, reasonable price, hot upon delivery, friendly service, and consistency. Again, this could have been, we could have had like 50 responses from the survey, and then we use the Kano analysis, which we'll learn about later in sampling, to weed down to these few voice of the customer requirements. Now, we have identified, well, what do we need to do in order to meet the customer's requirements? So these are the voice of the process requirements. So these are the required inputs that meets the needs of the voice of the customer. These are in the top vertical columns. You can add more columns if necessary. These are called the inputs to the process, and they are independent to the outputs of the process. So this is where we manage for quality. So you can see that we need a wood oven. We need a good location. We need delivery logistics. We need a reliable suppliers. We need trained employees. We need excellent recipes. We need clean kitchens. We need kitchen supplies. We need savvy purchaser, people who supply who buy the supplies. We need comfortable settings for the customers to sit in and just feel at home, to meet their needs. We need effective marketing. We need coupons. We need a website, an e-commerce website, robust e-commerce website. We need paper menus, and we need a catchy brand. So these are all the voice of the process requirements we think we need in order to meet the voice of the customer. So now what we do is we compare the relationship between the voice of the customer to the voice of the process. And we do that with these little symbols. So a solid circle would be a strong relationship. This little triangle or delta symbol is a medium correlation. And a 0 with a circle with nothing in it is a small correlation. So go ahead and fill those out all the way through, comparing each one. If you leave it blank, it just means there's absolutely no correlation. There's none. You can't assign any. So let's just say this is how we filled it out. So you can see here the tasty sauce and the wood oven. It's a strong correlation. Friendly service to a good location is strong. A snappy texture to the wood oven is strong. In some areas that we don't have any correlation at all, wood oven, a wood fired to excellent recipes. Well, not really much correlation there. Wood fired to a savvy purchaser, not much correlation there. So go ahead and fill this out and using these symbols. So after we filled out this, we want to look at the roof. And this is where it gets a little tricky. Is we want to use the same symbols here, but we want to measure the input relationships. So what's the relationship between wood oven and good location? And that would be this little box over here. So it's kind of hard to read a little bit here, but let's just say we're like the yellow, the wood oven to the good location. That's that yellow box right here. Can you see how that goes from here to here? And that's the arrows there. The red would be the wood oven to delivery logistics. The blue would be the wood oven to reliable supplier. You just keep going. You just follow where they two meet, and then intersect, and then that's the box that measures that relationship. The purple would be the good location to delivery logistics, and then the green is, say, this would be the comfortable setting to coupons. So you do all this. It seems tedious, but it sure does help because you want to measure the relationship of these inputs. So this is filled out right here. We'll come back to this rating as far as what this means after we take a look at what the relationship between the voice of the customer and the voice of the process. So here's the roof filled out. So what we want to do now is we want to add up or assign a figure, because in Six Sigma, most everything is quantifiably assigned a number in order for us to rank things, in order to find out, what we need to do. So the tasty sauce, the voice of the customer requirement row, it would be 51. So we assign the solid circle would be a 9. The little delta or triangle signal would be 6. And then the 0 circle would be a 3. So we would, each one of these things would be numbered accordingly. So that would be a 9. This would be a 6, 9, 9, 9, 6, 3, and then this equals 51. And then for the wood oven voice of the process column, what we do the same thing here. So that'd be 9, 3, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 0. There's nothing here. And then a 9, and that would be 75. And then you complete the rest of the calculations. So here we have the rest of the calculations shown. And then from here, we can figure out what are the top numbers. So gets a little complicated, a little bit of fussy, but work with it because it does give us a lot of information. So once we did all of these, we can see our number one voice of the customer is this number right here. Lots of menu options. So one thing the top thing we need to do is we've got to provide lots of options, menu options. Now this is totally goes against your original hypothesis that you wanted to have a real simple menu. Well, your customers aren't saying that. Your customers are saying, hey, they want a plethora of options. Reasonable price. Your customers are price conscious, so you need to engineer your process for low cost. Consistency, your process needs to produce the same product quality at all times. Fast delivery, enough said, you got to deliver it fast. And then a friendly staff, you need to hire friendly folks. So those are the top five. And this is how you want. You want to have top five CTQs and top five CTPs. This is the house of quality for the voice of the process. So we're looking at trained folks, a wood oven. Obviously, you need a wood oven. Require the best oven you can get. You need delivery logistics. This is a complex process that needs to be designed. So this is a whole other process that you'd have to look at and assess. Reliable supplier. Find one or two suppliers that you can count on providing quality supplies. And then we got to get that website going. So those are the top five things we got to do. We got the top five things that the customer needs, and we got the top five things that we need to do. Then now let's just go ahead and look at the relationship between the inputs. So we saw how wood oven and delivery logistics have the relatively strong relationship. So after we take a look at those, we can go ahead and we can say, all right, wood oven to delivery, strong. And then we ranked a wood oven to reliable supply none, but that's we got to get that oven somewhere, and who's going to give us the oven maintenance? So we might want to rethink that rating. Wood oven to trained employees, very strong. Well, we said there's no correlation between wood oven and website. However, maybe we want to intentionally market that we have a fire oven on our website in our marketing. Maybe we want to relook at that. Delivery logistics to reliable supplier, none. Well, this should have been marked strong. We should reconsider that because we don't have a reliable supplier. We're not going to be able to deliver products. And then you can see we did rank delivery logistics to trained employees strong, delivery logistics to website strong, trained employees to reliable suppliers strong, trained employees to website strong. So just adds a tool that we can use on our inputs to figure out what are we doing, what needs to be done, and what's the strength between the relationship of the inputs. So in the end, House of Quality is an excellent tool to locate this critical to quality, what you have to do to satisfy the customer, and the CTP, what we have to do to meet those customer needs. Think of the voice of the customer's outputs, which are dependent on the inputs, and what we need to do in order to be in conformance to their customers' requirements. Think of the voice of the process as inputs, which are independent of the outputs. What we do in our process determines if our services and products can actually meet the customer's needs. This input-output relationship is the crux and the core of managing for quality.